Now we're going to move back to current day times with a graduate student speaker, Kenzie Gordon, from the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies and the Faculty of Arts, who's going to speak about powering up games for sexual violence prevention. Kenzie.
Odds are that in the last year or 10, you have heard many times that video games are making us more violent. This particular moral panic has been circulating since about the mid-1970s, and dozens of studies have examined whether games are making us worse people. But despite our seeming obsession with video games and violence, very few people have asked whether video games have the capacity to make us less violent. In the meantime, academics and game scholars have designed hundreds of games on all kinds of social and health-based problems, everything from games that fight food insecurity to virtual reality games to do physical therapy. As a lifelong gamer and a social worker in sexual violence, I wondered whether video games might have the capacity to improve our attitudes towards sexual violence and maybe move the needle on what has clearly become one of the most pressing epidemics of our time. My doctoral research examines exactly that. Can games change our beliefs about sexual violence? There are compelling reasons to believe that they can. Research has shown that prosocial video games increase empathy in children, and as a fundamentally interactive medium, games are ideally suited to learning about interpersonal relationships and complex social problems. Educational game scholars describe games as the ultimate constructivist learning environment, in which the entire world can be designed around the learning goals. In my research project, I examined the question of whether a specific prosocial game, Decisions That Matter, could improve the attitudes of undergraduate students towards sexual violence. So the game is a 10-minute interactive graphic novel that examines questions of consent and sexual violence among college students. My participants took a pre-test on a measurement tool called the Illinois Rape Myth Acceptance Scale, which measures their levels of endorsement of common misconceptions that promote sexual violence. They then played the game and completed a post-test on the same scale. So these results are obviously limited. It's a short-term intervention, but I think that they're very promising. So playing the game created some improvements in attitudes around, towards sexual violence of participants in general, but it was especially effective among men who had very high initial levels of endorsement of rape myths. On this slide, you can see the pre and post-test results for this group of men, and this, a higher number on the scale, indicates a lower endorsement of rape myths. And you can see that in every category of myths about sexual violence, this 10-minute game intervention had up to a 10% influence on the degree to which they endorsed myths about sexual violence. So there's still a lot that we don't know about how people learn about sexual violence in games, but what this tells me is that games seem to have the capacity to help people navigate and deconstruct the complexity of rape culture. In a world where 1 in 3 women is going to experience sexual violence in their lifetimes, the urgency of finding innovative and effective ways of intervening in our societal endorsement of violence could not be higher. So I hope that this research can continue to ask questions about ways that games could help us end sexual violence. Thank you.